You're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Something's Wrong podcast. I'm your host, Dick Hickok, and today we're going to be talking about another foreign film. It's Tombs of the Blind Dead. It's a Spanish-Portuguese horror film released in 1972 and directed by Armando de Osorio. Now, this is an interesting movie, and I'm sure you'd love to get right into it, but as per my contract, we have to do the NOSLEEP bit first. And you all know why I do this. It's to pad out content and to just bring in the youth, because this is where the youth go to spread ideas about what horror should be. And I've gone back to my list of this one. I decided I would just start moving down the list because no one's voting, and I find that really disappointing, but not discouraging. So I'm just gonna keep moving forward with my little list here. This one is called "I Thought Moving to the Country Would Be a Good Thing," and it's by a user called Sunshine Dreaming, which doesn't really sound like a very spooky horror writer type of nickname, but to each their own. All right, so this is "I Thought Moving to the Country Would Be a Good Thing." Ah, shit. This one's a series. Hang on. Does it actually continue as a series? Yeah, no, fuck that. I'm not doing that. Never mind. Back to the list. Never mind. Crossing that one off the list. That's a series. I'm not doing that. How about, this is one. "I was the manager for a hotel with a very particular kind of clientele. I may have been condemned to something worse than death." Let's see if that's a series. Move on. Base, blah, 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 blah. Please don't be a series. Please don't be a series. Ooh, all right, not a series. This is good. Okay. The title of this one is "I was the manager for a hotel with a very particular clientele, period. I may have been condemned to something worse than death, period." And this is by a user called Abby Hutt. Nothing to say about that. It's just a name. All right, here's the story. I'm not going to say the title again. Here's the story. "Bury me at the Grand Rosette. I had always recognized there was something fishy about the job. I had been skeptical about taking it until the hiring manager discussed compensation. In addition to your generous base salary, you can expect to earn substantially more in tips. The Grand Rosette serves a very specific, very wealthy, very generous clientele. Even our most disliked managers have taken home at least $50,000 per month. Some have received much more. We don't put that in the job posting since we don't want to attract the wrong type of person, but suffice to say you will be very well compensated for any of the job's peculiarities." That was all in quotes. That was dialogue, I assume, from the hiring manager. Next paragraph. "The job certainly had Fuck you. The job certainly had peculiarities. For one, manager was my official job title, but I was effectively also the bellhop, concierge, housekeeper, chef, and receptionist. In fact, I was the only employee present in the hotel. The hiring manager had assured me this wouldn't be too much to handle. There were rarely more than a few guests present at a time, and they wouldn't get fussy if I couldn't be overly attentive. For the most part, she was right. There was one major exception, as the previous manager informed me on the day I arrived at the hotel. Yes, the guests won't be demanding. But if a guest does demand something of you, you have to accommodate them. Drop everything if you have to. Even if the request seems silly or if it requires you to ignore your normal hotel duties, you do it. That's the type of service that the generosity of the Rosette patrons buys. Fuck. This struck me as being a little concerning, but I figured I could always just leave if a guest asked me to do something I wasn't comfortable with. It was for one of these special requests that I now found myself in the middle of the wilderness with Auntie Estelle. Estelle had been the first guest to check in after my arrival. She looked to be about 50 in a way that suggested that she was probably at least 60. She had a cackling laugh and she loved to use it. She found my lame jokes hilarious for some reason. It was just me and her for a while, so we spent most of our evenings together. She appreciated the company and I found her fascinating. She was the type of older figure who had a lot of life experience and wisdom to share, but was equally willing to listen and never presumed to know better than you. We would play cards while she regaled me with casual advice and tales from her past. Hobbies learned and lost, ill-advised adventures, old lovers, and the festival. Ugh. All right, I'm going to try not to read these too fast anymore because I think people were having trouble understanding what I was saying the last time that I read one of these stories. So I'm going to try and keep the pace even as possible, and maybe I'll try editing out parts that are really fucking boring instead of trying to speed read through it. All right, back to the story. A few of the peculiarities... God damn it, that fucking word. A few of the peculiarities of the hotel seemingly had to do with the festival. As far as I could surmise, it was an event that was held at the Grand Rosette sometime in the past, maybe 5, 10, or 20 years ago. The stories were never really clear. Stories about something that happened. Or fuck it. Every present-day hotel guest had attended the festival. Apparently, hey everyone, Dick Hickok here.
Once in passing.
Some of the parts of the story are really fucking boring, so we're just going to kind of fade in and out to the interesting parts, if that's okay with all of you, because otherwise this is going to be like a 2-hour episode. No one wants to hear that shit. Anyway, back to the story. Woodstock type event with some sort of new age spiritual component, but I had no strong evidence for that assumption. Again, I was not asked to inquire further, so I didn't. It was a month into her stay that Estelle asked me to call her Auntie Estelle.
I don't have any family left, hon, and you're a wonderful kid, so it'd mean a lot if I could leave a little of me behind with you.
I was more than happy to oblige. She mentioned offhand the next month that I had been written into her will, which was a very touching bonus. Even as the months went by and other guests checked in and out, Auntie Estelle stuck around. She was a welcome constant, and I'm not sure if I could have handled the place without her. The hotel had other peculiarities that the previous manager and hiring manager had not informed me about. I could only attribute their negligence to willful malice. If I had known about this side of the job, it could have persuaded me not to take it. The first peculiarity
Dick Hickok
was the hotel's
again.
other visitors.
Yep, fucking
As I mentioned,
boring.
the hotel guests all had a few
Ooh,
things
there's
in common.
like spooky,
They were
skinny,
wealthy,
pale
polite, never
people
made
who
trouble,
aren't
or they
really
attended
explained.
the
They're in the
festival.
trees and they
However,
watch
they're not
me.
the only people
Oh
on the property.
no. What am I gonna do? Oh dear. Oh well. Oh okay. On to the next part.
Dread crept up my back. My body shook, but otherwise I was frozen. Stella broke me out of my trance.
Calm down, hon. It's just a visitor. They're not in any danger. They're not any danger. Just keep your eye on them. They'll get a little riled up if your back is turned. If it's getting to you, just go inside. They'll go away on their own.
She shook her head solemnly.
Poor dears.
I kept staring, transfixed, until the man turned around and walked back into the trees. She brought up the event again at dinner.
Sorry about the visitor, hon. The last manager should have told you, but they never do. If you see anything else like that, I'm happy to help you, hon. Just don't ask me about it. You can tell me about it, but never a question. And don't ask me why that is, either. She cackled a little at her own semi-joke. I saw a few more visitors after that. They all looked familiar, gaunt faces, tattered clothing, but I don't think I ever saw the same one twice. Stella gave me a few more pieces of advice, some unprompted, some in response to strange events. Don't look towards that part of the forest for a while. It's not dangerous. You just won't like what you see.
Ooh,
When
here's
I
some more
noticed a stack of
unfrightening
3
descriptions
boulders on
of
the
strange
tree line.
events.
They were
I
far
think
too
the
big to
scariest
be
part is this fucking old bitch is giving you like $200 million in her will, and you don't even think fucking twice about it.
Can't fault you for surfacing while you were asleep. Couldn't have done it better myself. My mouth opened to ask him what had just happened. His eyes sprung open, panicked. His hand shot up and clamped over my mouth. I swallowed my question. His expression softened to normal. Sorry, champ, but it looks... Fuck, why are you calling her champ? Him, champ? All right, whatever. Sorry, champ, but it looked like you were about to ask me a question. After the pool incident, the next 3 requests were equally strange but not particularly interesting to recount.
Thank
The final one was
fuck.
different. It was from Estelle.
I'm going on a hike, hon. I need you to come with me.
That didn't seem too strange, but the request never seemed strange at first. I knew better than to ask questions, so I silently got up from my desk and trailed behind Estelle as she pushed through the front doors. I was still in my work clothes, a polo shirt, slacks, and shoes that were pretty comfortable for daily wear.
The descriptions aren't bad, but they're just so... Sometimes it's just really uninteresting and just does nothing to move the plot forward. And the plot is thin as it is.
The hours came and went. The sun set. Our paths began to ascend. More hours. The sun rose. Holy shit. Hang on, just a little bit of an aside. They fucking hiked for 12 hours straight. Okay. We came to the crest of a rocky hill that might have been a mountain. For the first time since our departure, Estelle spoke. Keep your eyes closed. Sorry. Estelle spoke.
Keep your eyes closed until you awaken. Don't look up.
I shut my eyes obediently and waited. I heard nothing, not even a footstep from Estelle or the sound of distant wildlife. Utter silence. I didn't feel the sensation of falling asleep, but it happened quickly.
Listen, I'm starting to get a little bit sick of Estelle here, and if you think that nothing sexual happened between Estelle and the narrator, then I think I have a fucking I have a horse to sell you.
But I wasn't thinking clearly.
Shit.
I had never even learned CPR. Finally, I fell back against the ground, defeated. I was too shocked to even cry. Estelle was dead. But at the moment of that moment of my realization, Estelle's lifeless head turned to me. In a voice like a death rattle, it spoke.
Bury me at the Grand Rosette.
I must have missed something. I checked again. The body was cold, unbreathing. Was I imagining things? I slapped myself. The shock numbed me. I barely felt it. I couldn't even think. The mountain went dark for an instant, then bright again. Dark, then bright, like a cloud had passed over the sun. A moment passed, it happened again. Bright, dark a moment, bright. My mind couldn't parse what was happening. The sun was wrong. I looked up. An eye. A great lidded eye, a pitch-black pupil, flaming yellow iris, brilliant white sclera. Sclera? Oh, I hope I'm fucking reading that right. It blinked. Dark. It opened. Bright. I fell to my knees. It seemed the only natural response. Again, the corpse beside me spoke. You mustn't do that. The sound was death itself. It was barely audible. The rotted lungs could barely squeeze out enough air. The withered lips can barely articulate. Stella never led me wrong before, but whatever lay beside me might not have been her. Nonetheless, I pulled up, my legs quaking beneath me. I tore my gaze from the sky in agony, like duct tape from a wound. Okay. The corpse felt impossibly heavy as I slung it over my shoulder. Taking a step felt like a Herculean task, and yet my feet kept moving. An hour passed, then too, I ceased being aware of the sensation of my legs moving. My mind went numb, and my eyesight faded until the only thing remaining was the eye of the sun. I knew it would be watching me if I looked up. Not hateful, just watching. That was worse somehow. Some of us believe in the existence of bigger things, but the mind isn't meant to see them. Corpses shouldn't speak. The sun shouldn't blink.
That was actually pretty funny.
At some point, I became aware that the trees were moving. Not just the branches. Not swaying as in the wind, though trees in their entirety. The trunks lifted
All right. It's almost over. Almost time to talk about the spooky ghouls. Don't you all worry.
As the sun blinked, a shadow crept across the forest floor. The width was greater than the horizon. Something behind me was casting it. The air smelled like ozone. I didn't dare look. The shadow eclipsed the horizon. I curled up in a ball and held my eyes shut. It was all I could do. Death would be better than seeing that thing. The tears finally caught up to me, and I sobbed. I cried for my mother and my father, and lamented my birth in a world in which such things existed. Again, I awoke, unaware I had fallen asleep. The trees were back, but now they just watched, their mandibles tucked away. I slumped down against a log and took a moment to collect myself. The corpse was smiling now, its lips withered away. It was little more than a desiccated husk. It seemed too soon for that, but stranger things had happened. I stood up and collected the corpse. It seemed lighter now. I started seeing the visitors, with their tattered clothing and hideous paleness. I didn't see them approach me. I just turned and they were there. I tripped, looked up, and one stood 2 feet in front of me. I maintained eye contact as Estelle had suggested. Found that if I broke their line of sight by ducking behind a tree, they wouldn't be there when I peeked back out. This mostly kept them at bay. I kept hearing footsteps behind me. I hoped it was the visitors. Eventually, the hotel came into view. It looked to be only 100 yards away, but it took me hours to reach it. There's already a hole waiting for me in the rear yard, a round shaft only a couple feet across. I took my final strained steps up to the edge and peered inside. The hole was impossibly deep. I couldn't see the bottom. I could only imagine it led to Sheol itself. I don't know what the fuck that means. Alright, back to the story. I considered the corpse on my shoulder. Farewell of some sort seemed to be in order, but no words came to mind. Instead, I let it down gently, sliding the decayed feet in first and slowly pushing the rest into the opening. As the buttocks cleared the edge, gravity... Sorry, that was unprofessional. I apologize for snickering at buttocks. As the buttocks cleared the edge, gravity took hold and the corpse slid out of my grip and into the abyss. After a moment, the opening closed, not in any natural manner, but like it was clenching shut. The light was different now. For the first time since I saw the sun, I looked into the sky. It was a mirror. Looking up, I saw a bird's eye view of the hotel grounds and myself staring up at me. And I saw other people whom I recognized singing and dancing. As I looked at myself looked back, and suddenly I was falling into the world in the sky, and I was among the others, and they were singing and dancing, and I joined them. You don't need to know the rest. I followed the rules. I can only assume that Estelle condemned me, but I do not know if it is because she didn't really care about me or because it's human nature to drag the ones we care about down with us. She left me $200 million in her will, and I haven't touched a cent of it. The other manager simply went home and forgot about this place, but I followed the rules, and yet I have checked into this hotel every year and will continue to do so until I die. The sun has not stopped blinking. But you broke a rule. So yes, I used to work here. As I'm sure the previous manager told you, you really shouldn't have asked about it. Now I'll make a request of you, and as you know, you're not allowed to refuse. So here it is. Leave. Don't pack a bag. Just get in your car and go. For the last month, I was the manager of the Grand Rosette. A traveler checked in, and I asked them a question that I was not supposed to. The prior excerpt was their response, which I have transcribed to the best of my ability. Now I'm hoping someone can help me figure out what to do. I obeyed the traveler's request and went straight home, and now I've barricaded myself inside my apartment. I would normally chalk up all that nonsense about the festival and the burial as a tall tale, but the sun has been blinking at me. Okay. All right. Well, what the fuck? Hang on. I need to go back and figure out what any of this means. Sun blinked. Corpse. Come with me. Yeah. Oh. Shouldn't have looked up. Okay, yeah, I guess that's what happened. The person. Okay, so they made this a little more confusing than you needed it to be, you know? I don't know why this, I guess it's just to be in the NOSLEEP format where it's someone asking for help on the internet. But, you know, other than that, this is on the very biased scale of stories that I've read from this website. This is definitely one of the better ones because at least it was like legible English writing, and it had some imagery in it. It wasn't just like either A, all dialogue, or B, just like bullshit that was not described very well. There's a lot of weird shit that happened. It was kind of boring. There wasn't, it was kind of a, one of those cookie cutter, like, kind of undistinct characters that tend to come from these stories. But hey, I read it all the way through, and it only took, how long are we at? It only took fucking 20 minutes. That's not bad. It's definitely going to get cut up a little bit because that's 20 minutes that I can't get back unless I go right into the movie, which I will. Okay, so the thing I actually wanted to talk about non-contractually is Tombs of the Blind Dead. Tombs of the Blind Dead is, I'm reading off Wikipedia, is a 1972 Spanish-Portuguese horror film written and directed by Armando de Osorio. Now, this movie was Armando. Okay, it's fine. You know what? Just as a preface, there's going to be a lot of Spanish pronunciations in here, and it's not all going to sound correct. And to some listeners, I'm not going to name any names, but it's going to sound probably a little bit offensive. But that's okay because I'm a quarter Catalan, and I am very well prepared for this task. Okay? So the director's name is Armando de Osorio. It was his first movie, or his first feature film, anyway. And it's basically it's pretty self-explanatory. It's about people who encounter a bunch of undead beings who are blind, and honestly, you don't really need to know much more than that to understand what the movie is about. If you're not into blind zombies, then you're not going to want to watch it. But if you're intrigued at all by the idea of zombies or revenants that are blind, then you may want to watch this movie. Also, if you're into foreign films, you may want to watch this movie. If you're into, hey, what are you doing here? That's okay. You can leave. Sorry about that. My let's say co-house, co-habitable house, co-room, room occupying person was asking me if I knew how to pay the utility bill, and I do, but sometimes there's a certain time for that. Okay, there's a certain time for that. Anyway, whatever. That story was boring, as most of it's gonna get cut. The tombs of the blind dead. Okay, tombs of the blind dead. What? All right, I'm just gonna go into the plot. I've wasted too much time already. Gotta be go. All right, plot summary. Portuguese people. It's a Spanish film, but it's set in Portugal. Okay, so you have these two Portuguese women meet up at a. They run into each other by chance at a resort in Lisbon, which is, if my research is correct, in Portugal. And so these two women, they know each other from boarding school or whatever they have for school in Europe, and they remember each other from school, and so one of them, who you think is going to be the main character, is named Virginia, but it's in Portugal, so it's Virginia. Oh no. See, okay. So here's the problem. So I read the full names on the Wikipedia page. So this is one of those movies where it's very obviously it's set in the country it was made. In this case it is Spain and Portugal. But they give the characters these Anglo-American names. So it's the three main characters' names are Virginia White, Betty Bet Turner, and Roger Whalen, but they neither look, sound, nor act like anyone named Roger Whalen, Virginia White. First of all of the names are pronounced in Spanish. Like they might as well just like they could have just had the names listed as the Spanish version of the names, because that's how the characters say them anyway. It's not Virginia White. They don't even say her last name in the fucking movie. So anyway, the point is Virginia White, you think she's going to be the main character, right? She meets her friend Betty. So in the movie, in the subtitles, it's Bette, European spelling. In the Wikipedia page, and I guess on the cast list, it's Betty, like, just Betty. But it's, in the movie, it's Bette, and that makes more sense. But whatever. I don't know why they do this. I don't know why all of these English dubbed, this isn't even English dubbed, but I don't know why all of these subtitled films try and do this. I don't know how it doesn't make it more relatable to a non-Spanish audience. So I don't understand why they do it. Why can't they just be genuine, Anyway, the point is there's school friends, and Virginia's with her friend Roger, who's is sort of referenced like a boyfriend. So they're supposed to be in a relationship, or at least that's how she makes it sound. But when Roger shows up, he immediately hits on Betty. And Betty immediately reciprocates, which is automatically weird and sets the weird tone for their relationship for the entire rest of the movie. You immediately realize that none of these people are particularly likable, except maybe Virginia, and even then, it's just kind of more pitiable, because immediately Roger's like, "Okay, Betty can come on this trip with us. We're going out to the countryside. You should come with us. Do you have a friend to go with you?" And Betty's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, okay, will you still go anyway?" And she's like, "Yeah." And Virginia's like, she does the whole silent, just like silent horror thing where she's just like, just kind of like looks around. And so they all go on this train together, and we find out that the situation is extra awkward because apparently Virginia and Betty were in a romantic relationship back in school, which of course we get with a graphic flashback of them making out on a bed. Now, considering this is 1972, quite progressive. I will say that this movie is more interesting than you might think from something that just looks like some schlock piece of shit zombie movie called Tombs of the Blind Dead. I think it's very possible that the director may have actually had artistic intent, which is not something that I say very often. But anyway, we're not at that point yet. Right now, it's just like flashback to woman kissing, and that shows why it's awkward and also doesn't really make sense. Because for whatever reason, Betty's just like totally into this Roger guy who she just met. By the way, Roger looks exactly how you would think this 1970s Roger guy would be. He's sweaty. He's slightly overweight. You can't tell how old he is, and his hair's got that, that greasy post-Beatles fucking mop style. And so he doesn't look good. He's obviously like an asshole who's just willing to go hit on everybody. He kind of at one point just grabs Betty and makes her sit on his lap. That doesn't make any sense. Sit on his lap. And she just goes like, "Oh, okay." Except, in Spanish. But I can't speak Spanish, so I'm not going to try and repeat that. That would just be insensitive. Anyway, the things get so awkward on the train that Virginia simply takes her bag, which I can't imagine has that many clothes or anything in it, and simply she asks one of the train employees, one of about 5 other characters in this movie that have speaking roles. And she asks him, and he's like, "Nope, there's nothing for miles." And she's like, "Okay." And then she just jumps off the train in her shorts and with just a little bag with her, and just goes gallivanting off into the Spanish countryside. And then Roger and Betty are like, Virginia, where are you going?" And she just walks off into the woods. She has no idea that there's anything for miles, but situation's obviously so awkward that she jumps off a moving train and somehow doesn't injure herself, and just walks off into the Spanish plain where the rain mainly whatever, fuck off. So she comes upon this abandoned village that looks like all old and medieval and run down. She immediately breaks 2 doors because she's going around and knocking on doors in this obviously abandoned village. And eventually she just breaks into enough houses where she finds one that she just wants to stay the night in. And I guess she has a little blanket or something. And she's like, "I'll just stay the night here." And she starts listening to jazz music and reading a book, which honestly I find, as an artistically minded individual myself, someone with an elevated non-Philistine mind, I can appreciate that. She just wants to, sit back, read a book, and listen to some jazz music on her Walkman. But while this happens, oh no, headstones in the graveyard. By the way, she passes this graveyard and is just like, a graveyard, whatever. But yeah, the headstones at the graveyard start moving and just getting overturned, and then a big skeletal hand comes out of the ground, and oh no, it's the blind dead. They're here. A bunch of zombies wearing like hoods and shit come out of the graves, and they start walking around really slowly doing this weird medieval chant, just like and they walk really slow. And so immediately you're like, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to watch these zombies walk around the entire rest of the film, just really slow and, just cornering people. And then you're going to be like, oh, how the fuck did you get cornered by this slow, shuffling, walking corpse? Then out of nowhere, two of them come out and they're riding horses. And you're like, holy shit, these zombies can ride horses. And so the horse-riding zombies go charging out into the town. And Virginia, of course, she doesn't know what's going on until eventually, I guess, she just kind of like sees one really slowly try and open the door. And so she, freaks out, runs, sort of successfully gets away because they're so ridiculously slow and like creaky looking. And she eventually steals one of their horses, which surprised me because I was thinking like, okay, zombies, right? They got zombie horses. Wrong. Not zombie horse. Living horse. Living horse that they got from somewhere. I don't know. Maybe they can breed horses in the land of the dead. They just out here tending to the cattle in the daylight, and then at the night they go hunting for blood. But yeah, this is a living horse. She steals the horse, but she's not that good at riding a horse. I mean, she stays on, so I guess she's good enough, but apparently the dead dudes are better at riding horses. And when you hear their backstory, it kind of makes more sense as to why they're good at riding horses. But anyway, they ride her down, they take her off the horse, and they surround her, and then she screams, ah! And then it cuts to black, and then it cuts to fucking Roger and Betty just sitting out at brunch at their hotel the next day. So, yeah. That's right. The next scene is them. They're just sitting there eating brunch. They're like eating like a plate of oranges or some shit like that. Just the type of stuff that people would eat in the 70s, just a plate of fruit and then like hard liquor at like 9 a.m. And they're just sitting out there and they're like, well, I wonder what happened to Virginia. And so they ask this waitress and they talk about kind of where they were and whether there were any towns out there that she could have stayed at. Because apparently they just didn't bother to fucking go look for her before nightfall. They just let her walk it, just walk it off. And so they just went to the hotel, presumably banged or something. It's not super explicit about how serious their relationship is, but they basically hang out for the rest of the movie, right? But yeah, they talk to this waitress. This waitress is like, "Oh no, I don't want to talk about that place," because she mentions that there's like some old town out there, and she's like, "I don't want to talk about that place. I'll get fired." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And they kind of managed to pull a little bit out of her that like, there's some cursed shit out there and like, just some bullshit that's like evil. And then the concierge comes over and is like, "Hey, what's going on over here?" And then Roger's like, "Hey, you guys got some horses?" Not like, "Oh, let's get the constable and let's go find out where she is." Or let's, just go take the train back. No, let's go get some horses and then we'll just ride out there ourselves. And the concierge is like, "Why? Where are you going?" He's like, "Oh, to Berzano." I guess the town is Berzano. I think that's the name that the waitress mentioned. And the concierge is like, "Berzano?" And then Roger's like, "Yes, from the Knight's Tale. Good day, going to get horses now," and then just leaves. And that automatically doesn't make any sense because how the fuck does Roger know that it's a tale about knights? Like automatic. So you talk about me doing spoilers during these podcasts. Roger already spoiled the fucking plot point of the movie. That these zombies are fucking knights. And they only find that out after a little while later. So why is Roger like, oh, The Knight's Tale? That's just shoddy script writing right there, or maybe shoddy editing, which is something I know all too well. I know all too well with the people who I work with, who happen to do the editing for all of these recordings. I know it all too well. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Fucking idiot. Anyway, so they get out to Berzano, and they're looking around. And they find her old little campsite or whatever, and they find her shoe. And then they turn around, and all of a sudden there's two police inspectors there. And it's like, who called them out there? Also, not that just that they were out there, but they already found her body. Like literally, Virginia got surrounded and presumably killed by the zombie knights, I guess. The zombie knights at dawn, right? She was asleep at night, and it was up late, and then by the time that she got killed, it was almost dawn, or maybe that could have just been the poorly done day for night type of filming that they were doing, where it's it's daytime, but they're trying to pretend that it's nighttime. But it looked like it was basically dawn. You could see the sun shining over the horizon. It's oh, the sun's coming up. And so somehow in that time between dawn and brunch, the police already made it out there to the middle of nowhere and found this body, and were just waiting for her friends to come by so they could come by and ask questions. And by the way, as you might expect, the police are completely fucking useless for the entire movie. They're only there to just kind of tell the characters things and, to theoretically transport them to the next location. And the next location, of course, is the morgue, where they find her body covered in all these horrible human bites. And so the autopsy report is, or the what the fuck is it called? The coroner. The coroner, he's oh, this must be a bunch of sadists. And it's many multiple sadists all bit her. They all just bit her, and all her blood is gone. And all her blood's gone, but she got bitten to death by people, I guess. And Roger and Betty are oh, wow, that's horrible. But then apparently they just kind of go back, after that, after the case gets closed or whatever, they sort of just go back to what they were doing. Betty goes back to work, and then her coworker tells her to just forget about her friend Virginia. It's just why don't you focus on your work and forget about your friend? She literally says something like that. Of course, it's in Spanish, but that was what the translation apparently was. Just, focus on your work and forget about your friend. She's gone. She's dead. The zombies ate her. It's over. So, yeah, the next scene, fuck, I don't remember. Some other shit happens. Roger still is interested in finding out what happened to Virginia, and Betty probably is too, because her job at the fucking mannequin store is, it's just not distracting her from the fact that her friend was bitten to death in a field in Spain after she started hitting on her boyfriend. By the way, not a lot of guilt felt about that. Not on the train, and not really much afterwards either. On the train, the part of the reason why Virginia gets off the train in the first place is because Betty pulls her aside and criticizes her for acting childish, which I guess would make sense if it was oh, okay, this is supposed to be they're just platonic friends. But obviously, if they're going out alone together to the countryside, they aren't just platonic friends, just trying to build a relationship. So I don't know why Betty's being so initially was being so ridiculously bitchy, and then afterwards is oh man, I'm thinking about my friend, but also I don't have any regret that I met Roger or was hitting on him or whatever, and having him hit on me. So no regret from her from that. But that doesn't matter, because they're trying they're still kind of trying to figure out what happened to her, or Roger's still kind of obsessed about it. In the meantime, in the middle of the night, actually, fuck, how do I want to explain this? God damn, this movie is so fucking much. So much. Okay, yeah. A lot goes on in this movie. I guess up to this point, really what I've been doing, none of this stuff is all that important to the core plot. So I think, if this was enough of a teaser for you, go and find this movie. It's on Shudder and probably some other scumbag streaming service, and go and watch it. Because from here on out, it's going to be spoilers. This is where all the good shit comes in. I've just been setting up how shitty our core main characters are, and that's about it so far. But anyway, so eventually Roger and Betty go and find this history professor. They find this history professor who's like all fucking, he knows a lot about the medieval history of the region. And so he immediately tells, the professor immediately tells them that the fucking legend of the undead knights of Berzano, the undead, he immediately tells them that the legend is real, right? So he's just like, oh yes, the knights are back. The knights are back. Yes, they are. The knights are back. He says, and Roger's like, wait, what? What the fuck did you just say? The knights, you mean like a new sect has risen up? And he's like, no, the undead knights have come back and they're here and they're going to drink all the blood. And meanwhile, while this is happening at the morgue, the coroner or the night guard or whoever, and then these two scumbaggy looking dudes who work at the morgue, they have a conversation about how she deserved how Virginia deserved what she got for flaunting herself or whatever. And it's it's so bizarre. It's such a bizarre conversation. It's one of the guys ends up saying that she deserved to be bitten, which is the most bizarre fucking thing I've ever heard in a movie so far. It just doesn't really. I don't know. Once again, leads back to I don't know if this director was trying to make kind of a more artistic statement about feminism and the toxicity of men and things like that. I mean, the characters were initially, in the first 2 minutes before they start talking to a dude, they're kind of set up that way. They're just when Betty and Virginia first meet, they initially are just talking about what work they're doing. They both have jobs. They're both reasonably successful in the things that they do. And they don't immediately talk about men. And then, of course, when the first man shows up, it's immediately just a fucking grab-ass fest. And, no agency among the woman for basically the entire rest of the movie, right? It's thrown out the window. Initially, though, it seems okay, these are kind of smart women. Then you find out that, they had a romantic relationship in the past, so it's not just just women falling for straight masculine men. No, these are women with a past who are kind of interesting. And then it's then you have all these hyper vulgar male characters coming out of nowhere and being yes, she deserved to be bitten to death because she wore shorts or something like that. Anyway, it seems like the director is trying to make kind of a statement there somewhere, but it kind of gets lost in, I don't want to say lost in translation because it's a foreign film and that sounds borderline racist, but it really does just seem to get lost in whatever, in kind of the meandering script. But anyway, so those guys, they have a weird conversation, and then the two creepy morgue workers go home, and the one creepy morgue guard is left behind. And he's keeps fucking with this frog in a tank. He's got a pair of tweezers and he keeps pulling at this frog. It's he's trying to take the frog out of the little jar, but the frog doesn't want to leave the jar and the guy doesn't want to pull the frog that much. So he keeps just grabbing it by the leg and letting it go and going, and then grabbing it by the leg and then letting it go. And while he's doing this, fucking Virginia rises up from the dead in the morgue bed. She's covered, she's, white as a sheet, covered in bruises and teeth from zombie nights. And she rises up, and then she creeps up behind the guard while he's just fucking with the frog. And apparently he doesn't hear anything over the sound of the music, which, by the way, was pretty sweet, honestly. It's like medieval chant music mixed with like a weird organ going and then like she comes up behind him, bites him on the neck, and it's like, oh shit, first interesting kill in like 20 minutes. Awesome, cool. And he's like, he bleeds out or whatever. And yeah, and so that's what's happening while they're talking with the historian. Oh, also, I guess this also kind of happens in the same time frame. I screwed up the chronology. It happens sometimes. I'm not perfect. But this also happens while Betty and Roger are going and talking with the professor. So Virginia makes it all the way to Betty's fucking mannequin store, presumably to find Betty, maybe? Either to find Betty and get revenge, or maybe it's just like she's just smelling something familiar. I don't know. I have no idea how the fuck she gets to the mannequin store. I don't know if it's in the same city or if she just walked halfway across Portugal to get there. But either way, she gets there, and Betty's assistant is there, the one who is like, yes, forget your friend and work on your work. And then she's there, and so she goes, they're in a very slow chase ensues because, even the freshest zombie of them all is still very, very slow and just kind of stumbles around. And this time, the assistant lady isn't caught off guard. So when she gets cornered, she still somehow gets cornered, We're not going fully into reality here. She still gets cornered. But she managed to fight off Virginia and then push her into a corner and then pushes this lantern over and sets Virginia on fire. And she burns to death. And so it's like, damn, fucking, like, just a bad time for being Virginia. Like, honestly, I do not think that Virginia deserved this at all. And so, like, literally all she did was just, like, be a little bit huffy that her friend was hitting on what she obviously wanted to be her boyfriend. And then she gets killed for it. And then when she comes back and is about to go and try and take her revenge, she just fucking gets stopped by some rando and gets burned alive. Or burned alive dead. Whatever the fuck. Either way, it's weird. It's weird when movies do that. They take the one character who could be remotely sympathetic, and then it's just like, horrible things happen to this character. And it's just weird because the arc took so fucking long, too. It was like she got to come back to life, and you're like, oh, man, she's going to eventually come up all the way to the end of the movie, and she's going to, bite off Roger's nose or whatever, or his penis, or maybe just the tip of his penis. And, but that doesn't happen. She just, like, kills one guy who's kind of gross, so it's like, hey, all right, whatever, killed one dude. And then, like, just gets, just fails to kill someone else, and then just gets set on fire and goes, ah! Like, she just shrieks for, like, a minute. It's bizarre. A very bizarre and sad arc for Virginia White. Spaniard. The Spaniard, Virginia White. But yeah. Anyway, back to Roger and Betty. They hear nothing about this and talk to the professor, and the professor's like, yes, it's zombies, it's zombie nights. And then the fucking police inspector from earlier comes out of nowhere. He's like, wow, Professor, where is your son? And we're like, ooh, cool, a red herring, even though we already know that something paranormal has happened because we just saw a woman come back from the dead after she was eaten by zombies. Or after she had her blood drank by the zombies, I guess. But yeah, no, the police inspector is like, oh, your son is a smuggler, isn't he? And he's a smuggler on the same river that Berzano is near, and he has a band of hooligans who he runs with, and wouldn't they want to keep people away from Berzano by spreading these rumors and these legends, and by perpetuating these crimes to keep people away. And the professor's like, no, my son Pedro wouldn't do that. And obviously we as the audience know, like, okay, probably Pedro isn't doing that unless he also knows the same blood magic that the knights do. And also from the professor talking about, just going on his spiel, we find out that these knights are the Knights Templar, who got eventually executed for witchcraft and hearsay. And he just describes one of the rituals that they would do, where they would, kidnap a virgin girl, and then they would just like take turns cutting her with their swords, which is weird, because it was like, okay, there was a flashback when he was talking about this. He was like narrating this flashback, and they were like taking big swipes with the swords, but it was just making like these little like, these little paint splatter cuts on her. And it was, if you know these old foreign films, you know that they love just using bright red fucking paint as blood. And so it was just like these little like splatters of blood from these guys swinging full on fucking broadswords at her. And then they all drank her blood. It was bizarre. It was like, I went to an animal shelter one time, and I saw a bunch of puppies just like, suckling. It was like that, except really gross. And it was like dudes, and it was like sweaty dudes who were dressed up as knights. So overall, yeah, pretty unpleasant imagery. Not all that scary, but certainly unpleasant. And so he explains, and that kind of makes sense as to why Virginia had all the blood drained from her body. It's like that's how these knights maintain their eternal life. They can go and, drink blood, or drink the blood of a virgin, I suppose. Or her name's Virginia. I don't know if she was actually a virgin. That's not really established. But, I guess they drank her blood, and that's fine. And then as it turns out later on, they can just kind of drink anyone's blood. So like, yeah, it doesn't really. All right, fuck. But I'm getting off track. Okay, so after hearing this information, Roger's next big idea is hire a boat pilot to go and take him and Betty to Pedro, this guy with a secret smuggler's base somewhere on the river. Roger, who does something for a living. I have no idea what. He somehow hires this boat pilot to go and take them straight to the smuggler's island. And when they get there, Pedro and all his guys just happen to be there. They're just hanging out, getting drunk. Pedro's with his girlfriend, who's like this kind of like mean, shadowy woman who talks like this. Pedro's like, I'm Pedro, whatever. And of course, as all human villains are supposed to be, Pedro both has a ethnic name and is darker in complexion than our so-called protagonists, who are also assholes. But yeah, he's there. He's a sweaty, lanky guy. He eventually comes out because someone tells him is there, and his girlfriend's like, "Oh, you're gonna go out and cheat on me again?" And he's like, "Maybe I will, whatever." And then he goes out and talks to Roger, and Roger's like, "The police are investigating you for the murder of our friend, but I don't think you murdered our friend. So my big idea is that you are gonna come with us to Berzano and stay the night." And it's I guess I don't really understand the logic here. I guess maybe Roger just wanted someone to come and help with the investigation who wasn't the police for some reason. Like, he just wanted to bring this guy into it, even though he thinks that he didn't kill Virginia, and doesn't seem to really know what's going on. But, whatever, it's fine. Just bring more people into Berzano. And of course, Pedro brings his woman there. But before he does, Virginia, or not Virginia, fuck, I keep mixing them up. Betty, the one who's still alive, who had been hitting on Roger this whole time, she gets off the boat after Roger told her to stay, comes on the shore, and after Pedro says, "Oh, okay, I'll go," and Betty says, "Oh, if you're going, then I'll go." And it's like, what the fuck, Betty? What is your problem? Why are you such a crazy slut? Like, I don't want to normally shoehorn people into these archetypes, but if there's an archetype that fits Betty, it's that she's a slut. I cannot believe this. First, she has a romantic relationship with Virginia. Breaks her heart. Goes off, I presume breaks her heart. Goes off into the world, becomes a fucking mannequin maker. Then, when she meets Virginia again, hurts her again by going and hitting on her guy Roger, who immediately reciprocates. Very strange. Also an asshole, total douchebag. Don't care for him at all. I hope he loses an arm. You know, just no reason for me to say that. I just hope he does. Anyway, and then after all this time of having a bond with Roger and calling him her friend, she's going and like cozying up to this random Pedro guy who's like a smuggler who possibly bit her friend to death. You know, she doesn't know for sure that Roger's right about this. This guy could have literally just bit someone to death, and she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll go if you're going." Sorry. Acid reflux, you know how it is. Yeah, anyway, they go to Berzano. They're getting drunk because Pedro's like, whatever, fuck it. I'm just going to bring rum along. And I guess it's his girlfriend's rum. I don't know how good of a smuggler Pedro is, but it doesn't seem like he's that good of a smuggler because he looks fucking grubby as shit. And he's got like, he's got like a gun on him. And he's like, "Hey, you armed?" And Roger's like, "Yeah, I got this gun." And Pedro's like, "Oh, that's a lady's gun. Leave that for the ladies. Take this man's gun. I've got my switchblade because I'm a bigger man than you, and I just need a switchblade." And Roger's like, "Okay." And then, like, eventually Pedro's like, "Oh, I'm going to go take a walk." And Roger's like, "I'll walk with you." And Pedro's like, "Fuck you. I don't want to hang out with you, Roger." And Roger's like, "Oh, okay." And then Betty's like, "Oh, I'll go with you, Pedro." And Pedro's like, "Oh, all right." It's like, once again, what the fuck, Betty? What are you doing? This is terrible. This is already terrible. And, you know, it just gets worse from there. So Roger's left alone with Pedro's girlfriend, who tries to get him more drunk, so I assume she can cheat on Pedro in revenge for him cheating on her, and presumably about to be cheating on her with Betty. And, you know, Pedro does cheat on this woman. I don't remember Pedro's girlfriend's name, but Pedro does cheat on her with Betty, but not in a fun, like, schlocky way where it's like, oh, he's seductive because he's swarthy. Instead, he hits on her. Betty sort of half-heartedly rejects him, and then he forces himself upon her in the middle of a fucking graveyard in the middle of the night with two other people on a very quiet island. And he literally just like punches her in the face and forces himself on her. And that's a scene in the movie. You know, they could have had it be like she's been seduced again because she's, you know, she has a weak will or whatever. But no, this time she sort of like resists his charm, or I guess whatever passes for charm with fucking greasy ass Pedro. And then he's like, "No, fuck you. We're going to do it in the middle of this fucking graveyard on the ground." And they do, because I guess that's just what Armando Asario wanted to have in the movie. So after that's over with, Roger's still trying to be like the fucking Fred in this fucked up Scooby-Doo hodgepodge disaster that we've created, or that the movie's created. And he's still trying to investigate stuff while Pedro's girlfriend is desperately trying to get him to like fucking be alone with her or pay her any attention whatsoever. But no, Roger's just like, "Oh, I need to find out what happened to my friend Virginia." And it's like, damn, fuck you, Roger. Just shut up. Just go home, dude. Like, seriously, just go home. You're such an asshole. And he's like, "No, I'll find it." And then the spooky bell starts ringing, and so Betty goes. And Betty, after the incident, Betty is just sitting and smoking cigarettes with Pedro afterwards, as though it's like, "Oh, well, I guess that just happened." And then the bell starts ringing. Betty runs away because she's like, oh, that sounds like a scary bell. There's no real reason for her to be running away from the scary ass bell. But she just runs back to go find Roger. She's like, oh, fuck that. There's a bell going off. And a church bell, not a little fucking jingle bell. Okay. It's like a bong, bong, spooky shit, right? Spooky. Church bell. Creepy abandoned church bell. But Pedro sticks around. He just wants to sit around and smoke his cigarettes. And he's like, whoever's out there, come at me. I have a little switchblade. And, of course, after he does that, all the fucking graves open up around him, and all the freaking zombie knights, the Templars, as they're called on the Wikipedia page, but not at all in the movie, they all come out of the ground and come out of crypts and also just out of random houses. Out of random doorways. They surround Pedro. Pedro doesn't run, even though they're really slow and have been, he doesn't know that, but like he could see that they're really slow, but instead he just kind of circles around as like, I've got a knife, stay back. And then, and they surround him and they grab him and they eat him. And he goes, oh, fuck, I'm getting fucking sucked on by a bunch of skeletons in robes. And Roger arrives too late, of course, with his gun, and he shoots at the skeletons. Big smart move. Shoots at the skeletons. Bullets do nothing. They just pass right through them or something. I don't know. You just hear the gunshot go off. There's no like effects or anything for the bullets hitting stuff, so you just have to assume that the bullets don't have any effect on the zombie knights, right? So the zombie knights, of course, these are the blind dead, right? But the fact that they're blind, and the reason why they're blind, the professor explained this. The reason why they're blind is because they got hung and then crows ate their eyes, and it's like, oh, and now they're blind. So it's like, okay, whatever, fuck it, they're blind. But this doesn't really come into play until now when there's multiple people around, because Roger shoots at them. And the zombies hear the gunshot, and they start going towards him. And he runs away and starts hyperventilating and being really loud. And so they just follow him. They follow him all the way back to the little hut or whatever where they're staying. And the two women are there. And so Pedro's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever doesn't want to let Roger in. Betty wants to let Roger in. So they fight. They get into a very hair pulley wrestling type of fight over the gun that they both, I guess they both have. I don't know who has the gun. I think Pedro's girlfriend has the gun, but then Betty punches her. So it's like heroic move on Betty's part. She's finally found which man she wants to stick by, the one who hasn't forcibly sexually assaulted her in a graveyard. So I'm glad she decided to stick with that one. But it's a little too late. Roger gets trapped at the door, and then the Knights Templar zombie knights roll up on their horses, on their fucking living horses that they breed out in their, out on their pure Arabian stock lines that they have out in the fucking woods in the abandoned village. They have these beautiful war horses that they've been breeding for 600 years in secret. And they rides up, and then finally an actual cool kill. One of the knights swings its fucking ancient sword and lops off Roger lops off Roger's arm, and it's like, fuck yeah, fuck you, Roger, you fucking asshole, you're done. You don't have an arm. But Roger isn't done, because the zombies are all so slow at getting off their horses that the fight on the inside of the building is able to finish up, and Betty gets the gun and lets Roger in and pulls him in away from the zombies, who are very, very slowly reaching for him. And they come in, and the zombies follow them in because, she can't close the door again. That would be ridiculous. And so the zombies come in, but luckily Pedro's girlfriend is really loud and obnoxious, and so they go for her first. And then she has like a weird death where she just kind of keeps gasping over and over again. She keeps going, and and so they get her. And in that meantime,
Roger's like, you don't talk. You got to stay quiet. They can't track you or whatever if you're quiet. And it's like, oh, well, then why didn't you just A, lead them away, or B, be fucking quiet and let them just eat Pedro? It's like if you had this epiphany earlier, you could have saved yourself an arm. But anyway, Roger bleeds out, and so in the time that it takes for Roger to bleed out and for the zombies to finish eating, finish killing Pedro's girlfriend, Betty's still there. She hasn't moved, and so she tries to stay really still and quiet. But eventually everything gets so quiet to the point where the zombies can hear her heartbeat. And she's like, oh, shit, oh, fuck. And so she fucking runs away again. And I don't really remember how the chase goes. Chase isn't that important. You just know that the zombies are really slow. But they have horses, so they should be able to run her down because she's on foot. But I guess she's just really fast and really tricky and better at running than Virginia was on a horse. Because she actually manages to make it all the way to the railroad line where she sees the train passing by. She's like, oh, shit, help. And, by the way, one other thing, a theme in this movie I found was victim blaming. And that's always a fun theme to have in a movie about skeleton monsters, victim blaming. Because again, when Betty escaped into the room with Pedro's girlfriend, immediately Pedro's girlfriend accuses her of seducing him and being a slut, and which is sort of true, but not in that case. And is like blaming her for whatever happened to her out on the graveyard, which is obviously very much traumatized her. And so, no female camaraderie in this movie, no real camaraderie with anybody in this movie. People are just constantly fucking backstabbing each other and just like, screwing everybody over. So it's like no one's cool in this movie. And victim blaming. What a motif. Anyway. Yeah, so Betty makes it all the way to the train tracks. Train's going by, the tourist train that they were on. And the train is being driven by this old-ass conductor dude and his son. And his son had talked to Virginia before she left and told her, yeah, there's no fucking towns out there. And the old man's we find out this old man is yet another cowardly, shitty character in this shitty fucking charactered movie. And he's like, no, don't stop. Just be quiet and let it go. And it's like, how are you going to be quiet? It's a fucking train, you old asshole. You're on a train. Don't just sit still. And so the son's like, fuck you, old man. I'm going to go help her. And so he goes and he starts dragging Betty in. And the knights show up and they dismount off their horses. And they very slowly walk towards the train. Now, based on the speed that these zombies have been moving up to this point, you'd figure that the train could just fucking outrun them, even though it's just rolling. But no, the train is, the guy stopped the train. The son used the brakes to stop the train. And the old guy refuses to get off the fucking train and help. He just keeps going like, quick, hurry up, get over here, quick. And meanwhile, his son is like dragging Betty, who all of a sudden can't fucking move anymore on her own. And he's dragging her all the way to the train. And he ends up being such a slow and awkward process that the Knights Templars are able to catch up to them and drag off the conductor's son. And Betty goes and hides in the coal cart, just in a big pile of coal, and just is silent. And the old man, gets cornered by the zombies, who then proceed to board the train. And now, I'll tell you what, as far as the climax goes in a horror movie, that's pretty fucking good. Because some of the zombies just take the conductor's son and then just kind of fall off the train. But like another 6 of them board the train, and then you get kind of brief flashes of them killing everybody on board somehow, even though they're really slow and it's a confined space. And you'd think that people would just run out the other side of the train. But no, they don't. Everyone gets slaughtered on the train. And it's like, oh, man, these Knights Templar are brutal. That's, they're swinging their swords and shit and, like, drinking people's blood. And people are going, ah.
and no one's fast enough to no one's fast enough to run away from them, and no one's strong enough to withstand them, even though there are piles of bones with fucking ancient swords that are like 500 years old and have been out in the rain. So, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's a movie. Kill everyone on board. The train arrives at the station. Betty's still hiding in the coal pile. Her hair's turned completely white. And then so some guy or like whatever conductor dude at the train station stops the train, which is moving slow enough where you can just jump on it and then grab the brake and stop the train. So that's cool. Finds Betty, and then the final scene in the movie is a freeze frame where some people go and look in at what's happened at the train cars because no one's coming off the train, and they look in and there's just screams, and then a freeze frame of Betty going, ah, and then the fucking credits roll. And that's how the movie ends. Oh, okay. So one other weird thing, before I draw my conclusions about this movie. So at the very end, you have the freeze frame of Betty with her white hair screaming. At the beginning of the movie, I forgot to mention this. The beginning of the movie is some shots of the abandoned village, with the creepy chanting and music in the background, and then all of a sudden it's like you get a shot of a doorway, and then the claw hand comes out of it, the skeleton hand, and then what looks like an old woman screams, ah, and then you don't see that old woman for the rest of the movie. Now, I may have to go back for a rewatch. But either that was some type of like little preview of what was to come, where that old woman was actually Betty, or there was the other weirder option is that there was a separate old woman, because in the morgue scene when they're shown Virginia's body, there's like an old woman there with like bite marks on her as well, and they're like, oh no, wheel that one away, we want the young one out here. And it's like, wait, what the fuck? Number one, what happened to that old woman? 2, was it the old woman from the first scene? And 3, when the fuck did she go out there on her own and get eaten by the Knights Templar? It just seems silly. It just sounds silly to have people getting their blood and faces eaten by the Knights Templar. Who even knows what the Knights Templar are? It sounds like some fantasy bullshit, but they're real knights from history that apparently did like witchcraft and shit. And in this movie, they're zombies that drink people's blood and hack at people with really poorly made swords. But yeah, that's a little unanswered question in that movie. There's actually a lot of them. There's a lot of them because probably the biggest weakness of this movie is in fact the plot. I had some questions down here. Who was the old woman in the morgue? Was it the coincidence, where it was like a separate incident? Was it some type of like foreshadowing that they were trying to do? Yeah, no, I had a lot of questions. I had ones that I've already kind of addressed. Is Virginia jealous of Betty or Roger? Why did there have to be sexual assault in this movie? It wasn't enhanced by it, and it didn't fucking really matter in the end. Why was that coroner fucking with the frog? That's in my notes. But none of these questions really get answered, and so I guess as far as that movie goes, that's that. As far as this movie's strengths, I think the effects are surprisingly good for the time. It looks like they made a lot of effort into making the zombies look as creepy and old and fucked up as possible. Of course, this was at the expense of them being very slow and weak looking, but apparently they weren't that weak or slow. I guess they were fast enough to get on horses and go and, catch people and, chop them up in a train or whatever. So, yeah, the effects look good. The acting is okay. I mean, it's pretty standard schlock movie acting. Nothing really special out of any of these actors. None of them are particularly famous. It appears that the two female leads, the woman who play Betty and Virginia, Lone Fleming is Betty, and Maria Elena Arpon was Virginia, and they both seem to be kind of like minor Spanish scream queens almost. There's a lot of horror movies and a lot of like thrillers and comedies in their filmographies, most of which I have not heard. But they work together in a couple different films, which I thought was interesting. So it makes me wonder if they were like kind of friends on the outside, or perhaps if they had another, professional or non-professional relationship. But, that's all speculation, because I'm really not finding that much information on any of these people. Well, one thing that's good, if you enjoyed this review, there's apparently another 3 sequels after this movie, all directed by Armando de Osorio. These sequels include Return of the Blind Dead from 1973, The Ghost Galleon, 1974, and Night of the Seagulls in 1975. And so I guess, if I really get desperate, or if I get, really good feedback from recommending this movie to people, perhaps I'll go ahead and review all these fucking things. I'll tell you what, I'd watch all 3 of them just so I could see why the 4th one is called Night of the Seagulls. I gotta see what the fuck's going on over there. But yeah, this movie, it's got more surprises and more depth than what you'd expect. I went into it thinking that I might just not even fucking finish it, because I was like, oh man, I swear to God, if it's just going to be skeletons groping women in bikinis for the entire fucking hour and 40 minutes of this movie, I'm going to lose it. But no, it was relatively entertaining. And I recommend it especially if you're into foreign horror films, and Spanish language films, especially, I guess. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that movie. I guess, probably my recommendation is a little more glowing than you'd expect after I was bitching about the endless victim blaming and sexual assault. But, with horror movies, morality it's not black and white, When it comes to horror films, morality is just shades of gray. Shades of gray, like the ashy lungs of the 1970s actors after smoking 20 packs a day for 47 years. Shades of gray. Yeah. All right, my voice is literally fucking dying. I cannot speak anymore. It's been almost fucking an hour and a half, and I'm going to kill myself if I keep talking like this. Literally. Not because I want to, it's simply I will simply die. I will simply die, and while I am willing to die for this podcast, I just can't go on any longer, Goodbye. Goodbye. This is Dick Hickok. Goodbye. Hey everyone, here's a little fun fact. Did you know that Spain actually passed the first laws to combat violence against women, specifically in 2004? Yeah, first fucking laws that were made specifically to combat violence against women, and that was in 2004. 2004 in Spain, the country where this movie was made. The country where the land of the blind dead had women being bitten to death and guys saying, hey, shouldn't have flaunted herself like that. Anyway, look it up. It's true. I'm just saying Spain's come a long, long way. All right? Long way. Bye-bye.